Born to roam, I love to travel.
This is Solo Travel Talk. Your solo travel advisor is Astrid Clements.
Astrid Clements has an amazing depth of experience with her solo travel. And here at Astrid Solo Travel Advisor, we strive to bring you the most innovative, affordable luxury travel ideas for the solo traveler. These ideas have changed and developed over the years as Astrid has explored the world. And on this episode of Solo Travel Talk, we document the evolution. I'm producer Katherine O'Brien. Let's start with the origins of Astrid becoming an intrepid solo traveler. Here's Astrid.
My particular desire to see the world started at a very young age. I was very lucky. My father, in developing his business, traveled all over the United States, and he always took me with him when he could. So I remember as a young girl, my first big trip, I think I was 8 or 9 years old, and he took my sister and I to Miami Beach, and we stayed at the Fontainebleau Hotel. And that was absolutely, I thought, that was like transferring me into a completely different world, a world of glamour, beaches, movie stars. I was raised in Louisiana, and so going to Miami Beach at 9 years old, I thought, boy, the world is really cool, you know. and I want to experience these things, as well as I got to go to California and spend a summer or two out there, particularly in La Jolla, which I thought also was just so cool. These people were very upscale, beautiful people. The landscape of California was wonderful. The avocados, I really had never eaten avocados, and I got to have avocado toast every morning. So that as a young child, and then Disneyland, I always wanted to go there, and I got to go there. I thought, you know, when you travel, you get to do so many interesting things, and it just makes you set new goals for yourself. And it was like, oh, there is a big world out there, much bigger than the world that I'm used to in Louisiana. So it kind of started there. Then when I was in high school, I took advantage of every trip that I could go on. And I particularly remember a trip during the Thanksgiving holidays when I think I was 16. We went up the East Coast. We went to Savannah. I think there was a bus group of about 30 of us, but we went to Savannah, Charleston, Washington, D.C., Boston, New York, and then Quebec and Montreal. Oh, that trip was definitely another experience that completely made me want to really travel and want to not only see the United States, but see the world. Because when I got to Canada and Quebec and Montreal, the culture was definitely different. Even though it had some similarities with Louisiana French culture, it was different. And I thought, you know, I really like it here. I like the way the bread is and the people. And, you know, so I was just opening myself up to different cultures and being in different places and enjoying it. So that was also a big kind of trip that really kind of started me saying, I want to be a traveler all my life. Then when I was in college, like many of us, I took my first trip to Europe. That was fabulous. Now, I did it as an exchange student or on a work program sponsored by Lufthansa. But it was wonderful. I got to live in Nuremberg. I worked in a German department store to get my German fluency. But during the weekends, I would go to Switzerland, or I went to Venice one weekend. I would take these weekend trips, Munich and Zurich, Paris. Actually, I went there on the way home. But the bottom line is, I absolutely fell in love with Europe, and I thought, I'm coming back here. Salzburg was one of the places that I went, and I just completely, you know, they talk about soul homes or soul places where you go, and you just are so relaxed and so happy, and it just feels like home. Well, Salzburg, Austria felt like that to me. I said, I'm coming back here and I'm going to spend some time here. And I did. In 2 years, I ended up, I was a music major, so I ended up going to the Mozarteum, which is a music conservatory, during the Salzburg Festival in summer, and taking some master classes with some professional musicians. And that was just a summer of a lifetime. Salzburg, Austria is really so beautiful. It's hard to explain or understand in pictures. You have to go there and feel those beautiful mountains and the clean air and just the warmth that's there, but all the music, and it's a very kind of warm, but I don't want to say sophisticated place, but they have very good taste there, and I really did love Salzburg. So those kinds of big trips, they really made me realize that I was born to roam, as they would say, that I just love to travel. And I decided that I want to be able to see as many countries as I can before I pass to the next world. I want to go to all the continents, and that's really part of what's led to me developing Astrid Solo Travel Advisor. I have traveled so much now, and I am going to do it until I can't do it anymore. And that's really how it started. That's the first part. The second part is that I was a little unique, I would say, in being born and living in Louisiana, because I had a mother who was born in Berlin, Germany. And my grandparents, who couldn't speak English, had a big influence on me as a very young child, especially my flamboyant grandmother, who was just full of life. And she really introduced me to a lot of things about the German culture that I would have never known about or loved or cherished. My mother was determined to be an American and be cool, etc. But my grandmother, she boiled potatoes the way the Germans do, and she set the table a certain way, and I just got a lot of little subtle things from her. And so that was another thing that kind of made me really want to travel and want to not lose that part of who I was. And so I've traveled to Germany so many times. I still have family there, and that is another part of my background that has been very instrumental on, as I said, I'm born to roam. I love to travel.
On Solo Travel Talk, we focus on the theme of being a solo traveler. You always seem to touch on people who have to solo travel out of necessity, but then you also highlight solo travel because it is a unique experience. Can you tell a little bit about why you focus on solo travel?
I've always been a very independent person who loves adventure, so it kind of came naturally to me. Plus, I had to do it. You know, at certain stages of my life, I was traveling for business, whether it was conferences or whatever. I would have to go, and nobody else was traveling with me. Or here again, I was traveling to Germany to visit my relatives, or there was some reason when I had to go by myself. And so I noticed about 15 years ago that there were more and more women that were in the airports with suitcases, and they weren't with anybody else. And I thought, well, here it goes. This is going to be commonplace. You know, I started, probably about, 50 years ago, traveling solo, more than definitely my friends. But now, I really saw that women are comfortable doing this, and they're also choosing to do this. This is something that is not such an odd thing for somebody to do anymore, because there's so many wonderful things that you end up experiencing when you travel solo that there's you wouldn't do otherwise. It definitely is an enriching experience in a lot of different ways. It's not for everybody. I can tell you, I still have a lot of my friends, they just look at me like, oh, why are you going solo? Your husband doesn't want to go with you. Are you having marital problems? You don't want to go with us, etc. And I do travel with my husband. I'm not having marital problems, even though we argue all the time. And I love to travel, so I can get away sometimes and come back refreshed and happy to see him again. But and I do travel with my friends. I'm getting ready to do a real nice trip to Paris with two other friends of mine that I'm very excited about. But the bottom line is there are more and more people that really are seeking to do this, and they know the value of it, and really are choosing to travel solo. And I had this big, I guess you'd say, aha moment, as Oprah would say, is when I traveled to Russia the first time. This was a trip that I had wanted to go to Russia so much, and I could not get my husband to say yes. And I was so frightened to go there, to tell you the truth. I didn't know about my safety, and I couldn't speak the language, and it has Cyrillic print, so you can't read it. Now, it just really seemed maybe too foreboding for me to do. But I was determined to go to Russia because I was fascinated by the architecture, and the music is fabulous, and I knew they were fabulous in terms of their cultural richness and their history. So I decided that I was going to do it, and I found a wonderful travel agency out of Washington, D.C. That created my first bespoke trip, which I made a list of everything that I wanted to do for 10 days, and it was a unique list. It just didn't go to the Kremlin and some of your basic things that you do in Moscow and St. Petersburg. I wanted to go to Segev Posad, where it's basically like where the Russian Orthodox Church, their Vatican, or kind of their central area. I wanted to go into the countryside. I wanted to ride in a troika. I wanted to go to Chekhov's famous Russian writer's country home, because I loved his literature and I'd read about his life, etc. I wanted to see where the billionaires lived outside of Moscow. I wanted to take the Red Star Express overnight train from Moscow to St. Petersburg. I wanted to do just some really unique things. So I shared with this agency that this is what I wanted to do. They said, no problem, we'll put it all together. I said, I want to have a private guide and a driver at all times. I'm very concerned about my safety. I chose the 5-star hotels. They made all the arrangements. So from the minute I touched down in Moscow till the minute I left, I was totally taken care of with a driver and a private guide. I never felt afraid. It was the most wonderful experience. It was here again another life-changing trip. I thought, I'm never going to be afraid to go somewhere again unless there's some real civil unrest going. There are ways that you can do it as a solo traveler that you can have just a fabulous trip. So from that, I decided, there's so many people that, I met along the way that asked me, well, where'd you go? Why'd you do this? Where do you go eat here? You ought to write a newsletter. Like I shared my friends who are married. Why do you do this? And I would get all these questions for advice. And that's really what kind of led me to, in a certain kind of roundabout way, to develop Astrid Solo Travel Advisor, because I had done it. I had traveled solo so much. I love luxury, but I really am always watching the bottom line. So I had kind of a real knack for affordable luxury. I knew how to make things happen that were really fine, but not blow a whole lot of money. So it kind of evolved in developing my last project now since I've been retired, and it's wonderful. And by doing this, I'm sharing my ideas in the form of blog posts. I have 2 other bloggers. I do how-to videos. Now we're doing this podcast. And I also have started doing some trips where I'm getting a trip designers to help me design specialty type trips. I did one in conjunction with the Arts Council of Baton Rouge where we went to St. Petersburg, Russia. And actually I used the guide who now has her own agency in St. Petersburg to put together the trip that I basically created in terms of the things that we wanted to do. And the trip was just absolutely one of those fairy tale trips. It focused on ballet, classical dance, and we did everything that is cool to do, or a lot of the cool things to do in St. Petersburg. And I think my fellow travelers from Louisiana know that it was one of their trips of a lifetime. So basically, this love of solo travel now, I am giving back and hopefully informing other people who are thinking about doing it, as well as giving them a little entertainment along the way.
First of all, I'm curious, you want to get to every continent. What's your count so far?
The count so far, continent, I think, well, there's 7 continents, but I think I've been to 5 of the 7, but 45 countries.
Wow.
Yeah, 45 countries, but I still have a lot to go. I'm one of these people, though, that Europe has been my focus, because I speak German and, I love Europe. I've been to every European country, basically every city. I go back to the ones that I like. But here, since I started Astrid Solo Travel Advisor, I am going to go to the other areas. I mean, I've been some of the Far East and the Middle East and the Near East. Where I haven't focused is South America and Oceania, basically Australia, the Philippines, New Zealand. But those are the areas that I haven't. But I plan to do that. There's just so many hours in the year.
And to turn a little bit philosophical, some of the things you were just saying before about like you want to get to certain places before you pass to the next realm. Travel is one of those things where people, I think, have a lot of that sense of it is a trip of a lifetime. There's a lot of sort of the sense of accomplishing travel before we die. And where do you think that comes from? Like, do you think it's because travel has an impact on us, or kind of what are your thoughts on that? Am I making any sense with this question?
Yeah. Well, I think there are a lot of things that trigger it. Maybe you had a conversation with somebody, they had gone to, say, Ireland, or you saw some photographs, or you saw a television program, or there's just a random thought that comes to you. For you to decide you want to go there, there are a lot of what I called real and then kind of subconscious things that end up all of a sudden you say, I'm going to go to Ireland. Like I know I'm talking about Ireland now because I just got back from Ireland, and I have to share with my listeners. Well, first and foremost, I'd always put Ireland on the second tier list of where I really want to go. And I'm very embarrassed to say that now that I've been there, because I was really quite ignorant to how fabulous Ireland is, actually. But I thought Ireland would be very similar to England. I had been to Edinburgh, Scotland, and liked it. But I just thought Ireland was just kind of like, well, I'll get around to going to Ireland one day. Well, I chose to go to Ireland here recently because I went to Travel Bloggers TBEX International Conference, which was great. And it was in Killarney, Ireland. It made me go there. Well, I have to share with my listeners, Ireland is just enchanting. I have never been anywhere that I can actually say I was so peaceful. And I got such deep sleep. I loved walking and walking and walking. The change of the weather. I felt like Ireland's weather was going to be foreboding, like, kind of like the Antarctica. I mean, the Arctic or something, or Iceland. No, Ireland's weather is quite different than you would think. It's more temperate. It never snows in Ireland. Now, it gets a lot of wind from the Atlantic or the breezes off the Atlantic, but it's in the jet stream. So you get, one guy said, Ireland is the place where you can get 4 seasons in one day. It can start out hot, sunny, and then get a little cloudy. The wind will come in, then it'll rain. It'll get cold and damp, and then all of a sudden the sun comes back out. Well, that's true, and I don't know. I mean, I experienced it a couple of times, and I really don't know if that has to do with some of what makes you so... you just love being in Ireland. Plus, it's beautiful. It's so green there. I mean, I'm from Louisiana, and we're used to a lot of rain, humidity, and a lot of lushness. But there is something about the green in Ireland and all of the different vegetation and the hills and the kind of low-lying, I wouldn't say mountains, but and the breeze and the beautiful flowers and vegetation. It's just fabulous. I had to go, or decided to go, because of the TBEX program, but I probably also was challenging myself to see if I could love Ireland. And boy, Ireland hit me between the eyes. I mean, I felt, like I said, I felt really ignorant, kind of bad that I didn't give it enough respect. And then another thing, the people there, oh my gosh, they are the friendliest, most fun-loving people. I mean, every night there is dancing and singing going on somewhere, and you don't just sit there and listen to the performers. Everybody gets up and dances with everybody else. Everybody is singing with the performers. I mean, it is like a hoedown. If they don't get you up and start really getting with it, they feel like they have, there's something wrong. But they have so much fire and spirit, and they're fun-loving and friendly. So it's just really delightful to go to Ireland. It's an easy place to go to. It's very affordable, and I guarantee you, if you can't have fun in Ireland,
take a look in the mirror.
Yeah, I think you need some help.
But there is sort of like
did I answer?
Yeah,
your question?
I was going to put another sort of spin on it. It's like there is a sense of meaning that we get in our lives when we travel.
Yes, and I, from going to Ireland, I thought, I have to do better at really absorbing my surroundings and appreciating what I'm being surrounded by. And if I'm lucky enough to go back to Ireland, I thought, if I ever write a book, I'm going to write a book and do it in Ireland, because you have, there's an environment there that is so relaxing and freeing and happy and just really warm. I just felt like I'm thriving here, in a way that you missed when I guess you started growing up and you weren't, taking care of your parents or grandparents when you were 2 and 3. There's something just very, very wonderful there. And go to Ireland. If you want a trip to just get away and relax, and I'd say some good me time that really isn't like with a whole bunch of things to do. I mean, there's plenty to do there. Go to Ireland. You'll come back just revved up, and I guess your gas tank filled up again.
You did a lot of business travel in your business life. Do you think that people can get sort of their travel itch scratched by doing business travel, or is it just so different than pleasure travel that it doesn't quite do it?
Oh no. Now, let me tell you, all the business travel that I did really was another catalyst of me really getting into travel as being something very important in my life, because I had the luxury of really traveling to all of the major cities in the United States, in all the different cultures, and being able to have enough time to go to a museum or to do like an art fair. I remember I was in Dallas a couple of years ago, and right across the street from my hotel was the Dallas Art Fair, or the opening of it. And so I went across the street and I said, "What's going on over here?" Blah, blah, blah. And so they told me, I said, "Well, can I buy a ticket to?" So on my free hours, I went to the Dallas Art Fair. Then, because downtown Dallas they're doing such a great job with redeveloping that area, they have a wonderful arts district right downtown. So on my free hours, I went all through the museums in the art district. So that business trip turned out to be substantive as far as the conference I was at, as well as on my free hours, I took advantage of what was going on there and really what was special in Dallas. So I have done that in one way or the other a lot when I've traveled to business. I don't just sit in the bar or go up to my room or go off to go shopping. I try to do or explore the things that were unique. I know in that Dallas trip, I got there actually a day early because I wanted to kind of not be tired or whatever, because the flights were a little off. So I had enough time before dark. I decided to get a taxi or an Uber to take me to South Fork, where Dallas, the show was filmed, and I had always wanted to do that. I loved the show Dallas. It was so unique at that time, and JR was such a god-awful human being, and all those women that tolerated his whole thing and the family and whatever. So I went out there and I loved it. First and foremost, I was so shocked that house was just so little. I thought my house was bigger than that. I really did. I went, "Oh my God, and it's really not beautiful." It was.
Your little fantasy got popped.
It did. But they had the grounds were beautiful, and they had a place to eat, to shop. But I took some pictures. But I really loved it because I checked it off of my bucket list, and it was something that, part of Americana, etc. So back to your question about business trips and how they've spurred on my love of travel, or have I enjoyed them in terms of not just the business part? Yes, it really has been part of my travel, I guess, evolution. And I do share, or I do encourage people who travel for business, try to get out of just the business part of it if you can. If you can't, maybe you can go a day early or stay 2 or 3 days afterwards if you can make that happen, and do some of the things. It's really worth it.
Maybe we should do an episode one time that's just about these kind of tactics for turning business travel into something more.
Oh, yeah. I remember one trip when I went to San Francisco. Well, I had read about this lady who, she was an Episcopalian. I'm Episcopalian. And she had gotten into labyrinths and walking labyrinths, and the value of doing this. And I've always been, I have a pretty strong spiritual life in a lot of different ways. I wouldn't say I'm totally conventional, but my faith and my spiritual life is something that I think too. Travel, we can do a whole podcast on this, because I do a lot when it comes to delving into what people believe spiritually and everything, and I find this fascinating. But so I read about this woman, and she was just this philanthropist. She was very different, very unique, and I thought, she is somebody who is just very inspiring. Well, what she did was she facilitated a portable labyrinth to go all over the United States, to all of the Episcopalian churches that would want to have it. And they would have a special mass and a ceremony, and people would go and walk it and everything. And, I had read about that, walking the labyrinth does do, it gives you some kind of added depth to your prayer and sometimes some spiritual releasing. It's something very ancient and archaic that it's kind of like a motion prayer. You're in motion too. So I thought, and she had started this portable labyrinth in San Francisco, and it was there at the time. I said, I'm going to walk that labyrinth, So I did what I had to do, and we were off like at about 3:30, so I took a cab to the big cathedral where it was, and I walked that labyrinth, and let me tell you something. I had the most unbelievable, I just broke down crying. All these kinds of things welled up in my heart, in my head, in my emotions. But that trip, so many things happened on those 3 days in San Francisco. And I do think that some of why that trip evolved the way it did was I took the time to walk that labyrinth. So that shares just a little tidbit. I would have never probably done it if I wouldn't have been on this business trip. But I did do it. I took the time to do it. And boy, it was, and since then, whenever I travel anywhere and I know there's a labyrinth, if I have a chance, I just do it as a matter of doing it. And I can't say what I really would like to share about the labyrinths and walking labyrinths, because I think it's an individual thing. And some people might experience something doing it, and others might be stone cold. But I can tell you, now, if I know there's a labyrinth and, like I said, I have time, I just go ahead and do it, because I've had some pretty heavy experiences doing it. So that's just one little side thing. So I try to do a lot of different things that time allows me to do when I'm on a business trip.
Let's switch gears a little bit. You've been solo traveling for a long time. You've started Astrid Solo Travel Advisor to sort of share your experience and your wisdom. We're solo travel podcasting, and you have a lot of experience that has brought you to the place where you are now as a very experienced solo traveler. I'm sure you weren't always this dialed in with your solo adventures. So can you tell us a little bit, how over the years, how has your method of solo traveling changed?
Well, when I first started solo traveling, like when I went to Europe the first time, I stayed in basically a girls' dormitory for students who were studying in Nuremberg from the rural areas. And it was connected to the Catholic Church. It was called Anna House, but it was very basic. Boy, this was the first, it was kind of like a hostel, but it was, run by the Catholic Church, the nuns, and so they had it was very disciplined and that kind of thing. But, when I was traveling, when I was in college, I didn't do that many hostels, but I was more, not doing it on a luxury basis at all. Then when I started traveling for business, I, did have the alternative to stay in some nicer places. Well, all of this evolved to where, I'm now older and I do not stay in hotels that are not either 4 or 5 star. Now, I always look for hotels or places to stay that are authentic, that have something that's different, that really gives you an experience of being in that place. I don't really like to stay in 4 or 5 star chain hotels because many of them are so systematized and they're so similar. They're beautiful and the service is typically very good, but they're cold. So I really like to look for the special places to stay. So that's first and foremost, as well as I don't rough it anymore. I really don't. I will not go if I have to rough it or schlep around. So it's changed that way. Then I always use now a pickup service at the airport, especially if I'm in a third world country and arriving, definitely in the dark. But it is so wonderful for a solo traveler if you're touching down in Shanghai or Bangkok or Abu Dhabi to have that pickup service with your name as you come out of immigration. They take your luggage and you're whisked off to your hotel. When I'm going back or I'm leaving, I get the hotel to get me a cab. But I always do that now because it just makes me slide into where I am comfortably. Because I didn't do it one time when I was in China. And I must say, well, I didn't actually not do it. There was a foul up. But I can tell you, you can have some of your scariest moments with taxis. And I don't like public transport either, to tell you the truth. So that's changed. Then I do use private guides and drivers now, especially here again in third world countries. They're so inexpensive. And if you want to do key things, like if you want to go, I remember when I was in Beijing, one of the things I wanted to do was go to the biggest flea market in the world. And let me tell you, it is the biggest flea market in the world in Beijing. This is something else. Well, I knew that I could not go there, take a cab there, walk around there. I knew that I would be so uncomfortable, probably scared to death, and really not have a good time. So I asked my concierge, I said, look, I need a private guide and a driver to take us to the Beijing flea market and stay as long as I want. If I want to stay the whole day, I want the car to be there waiting for us till we get through. And I want to have the guide there so I know I'll be safe. I know I'll be able to negotiate if I want to buy something. She can share with me what tribe this is and blah, blah, blah. That worked fabulous. And so I've done things like this many times with private guides and drivers, and they are invaluable because they typically open you up to VIP access and all kinds of different things. So that's another different thing that I do. Another key thing is I stay longer in one place than I used to. I used to, when I was young, I wanted to go to Venice for 2 days and then hop on the train and, go to Milan and then, just go to as many places as I could in a certain period of time. Now, I do not like to do that. Just here, I'll make reference to my recent trip to Ireland. I was only in Dublin for 2 days, which it was so frustrating to me because I wanted to do some key things, but it never happened. I ended up sleeping late because I had stayed up late the previous night. Oh, they had such a jig going on at this hotel I was staying at. The Arlington Hotel. They have this wonderful pub it's a real big pub that is associated with the hotel. It's really one of the watering holes in Dublin. It's large, and they have different live music all through the night. And let me tell you, it went from kind of a folk singing to Led Zeppelin like at the end. And I mean, the whole place was just rocking out. And so I stayed up. It was just so much fun. I kept saying, I need to go to bed. I need to go to bed. Well, to make a long story short, I slept too late the next day. And then I ended up, wandering in and out of some of the beautiful woolen shops. I never could figure out how to get into a certain area where I would see key things. So I just let it go. I just started wandering and said, look, I will come back to Dublin and I will do Dublin right. But the bottom line is you've got to stay longer in one place to give yourself time to really get into the rhythm of the place. If you stay longer at one thing, you have enough time to recuperate and still do everything that you want to do. So that's key now for me. Plus, I enjoy so much more getting into a place on a deeper level. I like to take the food tours. I like to go to the museums. I like to shop. I like to talk to people. I like to sit in the cafes. Like one cafe I went into in Dublin was where James Joyce used to meet somebody that ended up being inspiration for one of his characters. I think it was called the Liberty Inn. I posted a picture of it on my Instagram, but it was a very quaint pub, and I could have sat in there for 3 hours. There was no music, but the wood wainscoting 3/4 up, and the fire in the fireplace, and I had fish and chips, and it just got me into being in Dublin. So I didn't want to rush that. And so staying longer at one place now really is very important to me. I'd much rather just go to one place rather than 4 and say I've seen a little bit of all of it and not do it justice. I don't enjoy that anymore. So that's pretty much how it's changed. Also, safety now is a big priority for me. Unfortunately, in the last 10 years, travel has become less safe all over the world, especially for Americans. So I'm I do a lot of things to make sure that I'm being as safe as possible. That's another reason why sometimes I get the private guides and drivers. I know I'm going to be safe unless you have an automobile accident, which that could happen anywhere. But typically, you've got that extra barrier. And my hotels where I stay, I research, location is very important. I like to do a lot of walking. I use the concierge to instruct me where not to walk and what to avoid. I do a lot of things where I wouldn't have thought about that before. I would have just left the hotel and, just been on my way. Now I think about it every day, and unfortunately it's part of how I travel now, but, it doesn't stop me.
One thing that has evolved to near perfection is Astrid's packing list. No joke, her packing list has been refined over many years and dozens of trips. You can get your own complimentary copy of Astrid's packing list. Just go to astridtravel.com. Right there on the front page is a place you can enter your email and download the packing list right away. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and really any of the finer places that podcasts can be found. You can really help the show and help other people find this solo travel information by sharing, subscribing, and reviewing the show on any of those platforms. We love hearing about listeners passing on this information to people they think would really benefit from trying out some solo travel. Thank you for listening, and we're already looking forward to seeing you next week on Solo Travel Talk.
Thank you for listening to Solo Travel Talk. Follow Astrid on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. To learn more about Astrid or Solo Travel Advisors, visit our website, astridtravel.com.